In this video, I'm showing you guys how you can build a melody by using a couple of tricks that I believe a lot of the songwriters and music producers are using. Take this video as a roadmap to getting from an idea that you have in your head to building a full-scale melody. If you like this kind of videos, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I post weekly videos where I help beginner producers improve their music production. It's also great when I get feedback from you guys, so if you have any ideas for any next videos, or if you have a topic that you consider you need help with, drop comments in the comment section below and I will reply to every single one. Okay friends, here we are in an Ableton Live session. The tricks I'm going to show you are general tricks, which means that they work exactly the same regardless of what DAW you guys are using. So the first trick I have for building melodies is lock in your scale. It's pretty obvious that you want the notes in your melody to be within the same scale. When we pick the scale of a song, we have the obvious choices: major, minor, different modes of the scales. Even if we talk about major scale, you have quite a few options depending on what tonic you base your scale on. For example, the C major scale and the G major scale use pretty much the same notes, but they sound different because the same notes have different functions in different scales. In C major, C is the tonic of that scale. In G major scale, C note is the fourth in the scale, which is the function of the subdominant. They sound different and they act different within the scale. So let's try to base our song in G major, and the pattern of a major scale is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now I'm going to duplicate this and I'll move it one octave below, and this will actually move off the grid. I'm going to fold this, and now every note that I will pick within my piano roll is going to be in scale. So in order to build a good melody, your melody needs to have movements between the first and the last note, because if we just play the same note for the whole time, it's going to be really boring. We have downward movement, which means that from the first note to the last one you go in a downward motion, and we have upward movement. Let's say this will be my downward movement. That's pretty boring. In movement, we have two types of motion. We can have a stepwise motion, which is exactly what we did here. When we go from one tone to the adjacent tone, exactly next tone in the scale, we are creating a stepwise motion. This motion is expected and creates a natural sound to our ears. The next type of motion is a skipwise motion. In this motion, we have movement in intervals, which means that the next note in a skipwise motion will be at least a third or more apart from the previous note. So let's try to recreate that. Another trick that I use when building melodies is the music theory behind building chord progressions and chord substitutions. So for example, if I have the second note of the scale, the second can lead to the fourth, the fifth, or the seventh. I'm not going to use the seventh. That interval is going to be too big and my melody will sound a little bit out of place. It's definitely going to be unexpected. So let's try moving up a fourth and then a fifth. Let's see how this sounds. Another thing you need to take into consideration while building melodies is the length of the notes, and also where you have your gaps in between the notes, because gaps are what creates rhythm, and rhythm is what makes your melody memorable, right? When people are humming a melody, they need to remember also the rhythmic motion within your melody. So now let's try to make this note a little bit longer and maybe add a gap here. Another trick is repetition. For example, if I'm just going to repeat this motion for 4 measures, see, you are bored already. So what you can do is start to create variation. So I'm going to duplicate the exact same movement. For this next measure, I'm going to add a couple of notes to the end because I also want to fill this gap here. And for those of you guys who know a little bit of music theory, you can see that this ends in the 5th note. Now the 5th note is part of the tonic triad, which is 1, 3 and 5, and that's exactly what I'm going to use. Let's start the next measure with the same downward movement, and we're going to use a variation of this guy. We're not going to start with the 6th, we're going to start on the 4th. Okay, so from the 2nd, where do I want to go? I want to go somewhere high. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so let's use from the 2nd, I can actually go to the 4th or the 5th. Let's try the 5th. It's pretty good, but I'm not going to use that yet. I'm going to go up to the 6th. Ding, dun, dun. I need to fix this movement here because it's not what I want it to sound like. Okay, that's pretty good. So we're gonna use this. Okay, for my next movement, I'm going to repeat this, but we're gonna use that 5th. Remember the one we used before and we said it's not time yet, but we're gonna use that now. Let's see what we have so far. Okay, let's move onwards, and this brings me to my next tip I have for you guys. When you build melodies, you need to work in units, work in segments that are dividable by 2. For example, you can build melodies in measures of 4, 8, or 16, even 32. But most of the times in dance music, we use melodies in measures of 8. This will help you later on when you are doing the composition of your song, because your song needs to fit within a specific measure. I'm deciding that my melody is going to be 8 bars, going to end with a tonic. I'm going to repeat this downward motion. In order to create another variation, I can move the notes around so that I have a different sound to my movement, right? Let's say that I will move the notes around so that we go down and up and then down again. It's not really inviting. Let's see if we move this note to the 5th. No, I don't like that. So this has to be a 3rd. Maybe. That can work. Even this can work. Let's see if this can work. This can work too, but this is actually a big gap in between. Let's see if I want to leave that for now. Let's play the last measures. Okay, so we pretty much have our melody ready. Next, I'm going to try to layer some chords under the melody to give it more power. And this brings me to the next tip I have for you guys. When you are building melodies, you need to have a home pitch to your melody. What does this mean? From all the notes that you use within your melody, there's one note that you are going to use most often, and this note doesn't have to be the tonic of the scale. It can be the tonic of the scale, but doesn't have to be. You can see that I have quite a lot of C notes, so I can say that the home pitch of my melody is going to be C. I think this is a good start for my chords progression, so I'm going to map that already. Okay, so I have my chord already, but the last note of the chord is going into the next octave. You want your notes to be in the same octave. So I'm going to bring this G to the bass note, which is going to be the third inversion of the fourth major chord in a major progression. I also want to fill this gap that I have here. I don't want to leave just awkward silence there, so I'm going to add a chord, but I don't want it to be too present. I want it to be familiar sound to the previous chord. So let's see if we can use these two notes that we already have in this chord, and we're going to build the second minor chord in a major progression. And I'm going to move it more towards the end because I want this last note to simmer in a little bit more. I want this chord to be more like passing towards the next motif of the melody. Okay, that's pretty decent. Maybe I can bring this even a little bit more in. Let's try that. Okay, let's move on to the next section of our melody. And we said that repetition is good for our melody, so let's go ahead and repeat the chord in the first section because this will make our melody memorable. But we also need to add something else so our harmonies, which are the chords, will not be too boring. So I see I have this D note here. Let's see what chord we can build with that note. So we have D, which is the fifth, and I can actually build the first major chord. I'm gonna move this. We still go by the same principle because I also have a B here, right? We said this is going to be part of the tonic triad. So we have the same notes on the bottom. But I definitely don't want it there. I want it here. I want it to hit with the tonic. That's the strength of the chord. It's not in the third. Okay, let's move to our next section in the melody, and I see I have this sixth note. Let's map it and see what chords we can build on that. We can actually build another second minor chord. And we're gonna map our chord on that. This is actually the first chord, or let's use this. Let's use the third chord, third minor chord, even if it has this sharp in it. here is definitely going to be the first major chord. And this brings me to the next tip I have for you guys. When it comes to building melodies on top of chords, or building chords to melodies, if you have the same kind of motion in the same time in both melody and chord, it's called parallel motion. Sometimes this is a desirable thing because it's pleasing to the ears, but sometimes it's not such a good thing. So for example, if I were to copy all the notes in my melody and put chords on that, that will really sound cheesy, and the chords will not enhance sonically anything within the song. So you want the chords to use a couple of notes from the melodies, but you also want to add something else. You want to add inversions, you want to add different rhythms, and this is what I'm going to try with this little section in my chord progression. I'm going to try to add a little bit of rhythm to my chords. So we said that this is the first, and let's see the third chord. Let's move this chords one octave below. A thing to remember that I wanted to mention in the beginning of this video: when you start your melodies don't always start on the downbeat. That's not a bad thing, but you need to know where you are in your song. Accent of my melody is not on the downbeat, it's actually on the backbeat. Listen to it. Bam, bam. If I were to build a song out of this melody, I will move this backbeat and cover on the downbeat, or I can leave a longer gap. So that was it for this video, guys. Thank you a lot for watching. Also a big thank you to my subscribers. You can also find me on my social media links. Have a great weekend. Bye.